Hey there, everybody. Both Andy and I have been playing in the Retro League for Star Wars CCG, and while I'm not very good, Andy's pretty good, and we thought it'd be fun to come up with a video of little things or big things to sort of help you improve at playing the game, whether it's the kitchen table or it's in a GEMP tournament or whatever, but just little strategies to kind of think about when you're playing, and maybe this can kind of help improve. So, Andy, do you want to kind of start things off?
Yeah, sure. So, um, this kind of came up because I saw, been playing in the retro league and I saw some things that some of my opponents were doing. I was like, if you did that backwards, that would be a lot better for you to do. I've been doing a lot of commentary on people's games. Either they'll send me a link to their game, and I'll kind of do an analysis of it and what they should do, what they should be thinking about. So I thought it would just be good to get a couple of these like higher level topics down to help people, think about how to approach playing a card game. So I guess my number one thing is when it's your opponent's turn, think about what you're going to do on your turn.
Yes.
Right.
Like it's just like chess. You should be planning things out, and you have this dead time when your opponent's playing, right?
Right. And a lot of times, what your opponent's doing, you really can't do much about. I mean, you might have a card here or there in your hand that might be able to like interact with them, but if they're playing a character or putting, some card onto the table that you're not really able to interact with, like doesn't really matter. Like you can't do anything about it in that moment. So you might as well think about what you're going to be doing on your turn, the sequence of plays. So it's probably my biggest, number one takeaway for improving your overall game is just to, you know, think about what you're going to be doing on your next turn.
Yeah, I'm going to hop in here and do. I think my top one it's resource management, whether it's Star Wars CCG or Magic or whatever. Every single game is going to have a resource,
Mm-hmm.
and you should sit there and know how many force you're going to activate, how many mana you're going to activate, whatever it is. You should have that number in your head, right?
Sure.
And I think everybody sits there whenever I play a game, they sit there and count and like, okay, you didn't know it's already not. Like you should kind of know like next turn I'm going to have 9 force to activate unless my opponent plays a site. So getting that mastery of resource management, that is a key sort of fundamental piece of a lot of this, is just being better at that. And then this one, just to tag onto that, is winning strategies are not always fun strategies, right? And I think
True.
everybody wants to have a thematic deck that I want to shoot down a whatever AT-AT. It's like that's not a winning strategy, right? Like these are bad strategies that are card intensive, that are resource intensive. So just start thinking, it costs 2 force to deploy this weapon, it costs 1 force to shoot it. You're starting to really deplete your resources on just like weapons that aren't even going to hit, right? So just think about that, the cost, the sort of marginal cost of a lot of these cards, and how they can really add up, and that can really just wreck your resource management.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Going with what I was just saying about, thinking about things on your opponent's turn, a lot of times, there's some type of a chess clock, or there's some type of like you've got an hour to complete a game or 3 games, like if you've got Magic and it's sideboards or, whatever it is. Really just sitting there and thinking is key, right? It can even be on your turn. Like obviously you spend your opponent's turn thinking about what you're going to do, but sometimes like I'll find myself where I'm like, okay, I need to play card A, then I need to play card B, then I need to play card C. And I'll get to my turn and I'll, activate my force or, draw my card for my turn or whatever I'm doing. And then suddenly it's like I played B and C, and then I'm like, oh, I forgot to. I just told myself do A, then B, then C, but I did B, then C, then A. Like, but if I just took a moment at the beginning of my turn and just refocused myself and said, okay, what is it that I need to do again this turn, and just sit and think. And sometimes, you know, game states and the board itself, what's out there on your opponent's side, on your side, can get super complicated. And like, just think through, the most likely scenarios that are going to happen, or think through what are the worst case scenarios. So like, if you know that your opponent's got a piece of removal and they're going to get rid of your character, creature, whatever, what does that do to your board state now? Do you just lose everything, or are you still able to persevere through that removal spell? Or, if they move their character away, or if they do something, how is that going to affect it? And sometimes you just have to sit and think. I think that's
I agree. My next one is, and this is more Star Wars specific, but it kind of applies to Magic as well. But just be aware of what's in your reserve deck. What cards? So you drew a hand. You have 53 cards left. In your starting deck. What isn't there, right? Like, what are you missing? What can you find, or what can you track? How can you tutor it out? I mean, that's one of the biggest things in Star Wars is getting your locations out. Get the zeros out of your deck. Find ways of getting those zeros out, because battles are won and lost with destinies, right? Because even if you lose a battle, if you can just absolutely smother your opponent with attrition, that is going to be a better outcome than just losing a battle by one force or something. Right. And so I think that's a really important thing is sort of beginning to think about what's in your reserve deck, where are things at, what are you missing, what remains, and part of that's becoming really familiar with what's in your deck, right? And you don't sit there and memorize it, but just a general idea, like I'm running 4 of this, I'm running 4 of this. That means, roughly speaking, there should be one. If it's if I'm running 4 something in a 60 card deck, that means every 12th card should be this card, right? In theory, right? It's not always going to happen, but just start thinking about that and being a little more sophisticated with tracking cards and where they're at, because that's really what's going to win you the game, is being able to find the stuff that you need to find.
Yeah, definitely. Like, again, Star Wars related, it's like tracking is probably the number one thing that's going to help you get better, because ultimately Star Wars is a D8 mechanic, right? Its destiny is 0 through 7. So it's the same as rolling a 8-sided dice to get a random outcome. And that's what drawing a card off the top of your deck is effectively simulating, rolling an 8-sided dice to get, a random number. So the more times that you can stack that with a 5 or a 6, 4 or 5 or 6 or something, like the better the chances that you're going to draw higher. So like, if you've got 12 cards left in your deck and you use 3/4 to play a copy of the signal to go get an effect, well, you now know that you've got 3 cards in your used pile and then the signal, right? And 12 cards in your deck. Maybe you take an effect out. Now you have 11 cards. So when you recirculate, if you activate down 11 cards, the top card of your deck is going to be a 5 from the signal. So like tracking like that, just even very simple tracking can really improve your game. And then knowing, like, if you draw a destiny and it's a 5, now that goes into your use pile and you recirculate and it's 3 cards down. So you activate 3, now you have a 5 again. And you can just kind of like keep doing that. And as you get better at that, you can then start to track it through your force pile. So you know where you're going to be at, so that you can draw it again and use 3/4 to, keep doing it. So tracking is really important, I think.
Yeah, I think that the bigger point here as well that I want to make is information is key. In any way you can sort of glimmer information, whether it's about your opponent's deck, if there's ever any time that they're going to search your deck, they don't find something, you have an opportunity to look through their deck and see what they're running, right? Like you're going to be able to preview what kind of stuff is going to be coming at you, what packages they're running, that sort of verify the deck option. So I think that information and sort of intelligence is really important, so you can preview what's going to come in the next few turns. Sure. So just don't sort of undervalue, the intelligence and learning what your opponent's going to do.
Sure. Yeah. And then I guess probably my last major kind of high level thing kind of goes in with the idea of resource management for yourself, but it's also understanding what your opponent has available to them, right? Like if they're only going to activate 7 force, and they didn't have any force saved, they can't play anything that costs 8. And if you know that a Star Destroyer costs 8, they're not going to play a Star Destroyer to your space location. So you can get away with, like, this turn using, say, 2 force to play your X-Wing to that location to be able to force strain your opponent next turn, do something else with the rest of your force. They can't play their Star Destroyer. Then on your turn, you can activate force and then back up your X-Wing. So you can kind of like split your resources between 2 turns because your opponent can't do something with the amount of resources they have. So in addition to being aware of what kind of resources you have, it's really important to know what kind of resources your opponent can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of last point here, 2 things. First, I think when playing the dark side, force activation is probably more important than light side. Like you just got to be generating force. You have to find. I lost a match because the guy, I refused to play Sense and Altars just because I think they're lame. But he just revolutioned every one of my sites, and I was activating like 3 force a turn. He had like 3 revolutions out. I was like, how is this possible? I just couldn't activate anything, right? So that is a very effective strategy for sort of strangling the dark side out. If they can't activate, it's much more important to their sort of win condition is being able to activate because they have all these big things. And the second point, speaking of big things, Star Destroyers, they kind of suck. They're not good. Usually the big things, I know that you want to put out a 9 force, whatever, Devastator or something, or Stalker, but they're just not very good. Right. And I think that's hard to accept because there's the cool factor, but it's in the large creatures of Magic. Like usually they're not very good, right? You'd rather go for like numbers over like one large, very expensive thing. So just kind of keeping that in mind. But I think that's all for me. And I think this, maybe we'll kind of stop it here, folks. If you have thoughts, what else, other tips, please leave in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you're here, you're probably, still a subscriber. So any final thoughts, Andy?
No, I think maybe we'll be back with a part 2 of this at some point. I think there's some good ideas out there on helping improve your game.
Yeah, absolutely. And reach out to Andy if you want him to watch your game and tell you all the things you did wrong.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.